sound, then nothing, like someone moving furniture very slowly above me. I stared at the ceiling for a long time that night, trying to convince myself I was wrong. You know how it goes. Once your mind decides something might be real, it starts collecting evidence. My brain went to work. Wasn't the peanut butter jar less full than I remembered? Didn't I leave the bathroom light off that morning? And the cereal box, I could have sworn it was closed. Paranoia is a clever thing. It doesn't come knocking with a scream. It creeps in like mist under a doorframe. It blurs the edges of logic and lets shadows stretch a little longer than they should. You start noticing things, feeling things, watching things, and worst of all, you start doubting yourself. I told a friend about it over the phone. She laughed. You probably just need to sleep more. She said, new house, old pipes, your brain's playing tricks. I agreed, or pretended to, but that night, I double-locked every door and shoved a chair beneath the bedroom knob, something I hadn't done since I was a kid afraid of monsters. Except now, I wasn't afraid of monsters. I was afraid of people. That was when I first felt it, the shift. Not in the house, in me. That quiet confidence that I'd always had about living alone, it started to fracture. Like a mirror slowly cracking from the center outward, each sound was now a footstep. Each silence was now a breath being held by someone I couldn't see. I no longer walked freely around my home at night. I crept. I didn't say it aloud, not yet, but I had the thought. That dark, absurd, goosebump-raising thought, what if someone's living in my attic? I said it in my head, then instantly dismissed it, because things like that don't happen to people like me. They happen to the kind of people who forget to lock their doors, or who live in big houses in horror movies, not people who live in tiny, practical, dull homes like mine. Still, I couldn't shake it. The fourth night, I left a granola bar on the kitchen counter on purpose. I knew I hadn't eaten it. I made a mental note of its position, 3 inches from the microwave, tilted slightly to the right, like setting a trap, only I didn't know what for. I woke up the next morning and it was gone. No crumbs, no wrapper, just gone. That's when fear changed its color. It stopped being abstract. It became bone deep and solid. It became something I could feel in my chest like a second heartbeat. I searched the house top to bottom, checked every window, every closet, even under the bed like a nervous child. Nothing, no signs of forced entry, no unlocked windows, and yet, someone had been inside. I could feel it, I could smell it, that faint musk of breath and dust and something too human to be explained by animals or old wood. Still, I didn't go up to the attic. I told myself there was no ladder, that I was too tired, that if someone was up there, it was better not to know, because what would I even do? What would I say? What if he was violent? What if he'd been watching me for weeks? I told myself I was being crazy. I told myself all the things people tell themselves when they're trying to pretend everything is fine. And then came the mirror. The bathroom mirror, steamed over from the hot shower. I stepped out, wiped my face, and froze, because something was written on the glass. Not clearly, not like someone had written it with purpose. It was faint, almost hesitant, but unmistakable. A single word, alone, that was it. That was the moment the illusion shattered. My world. A world I had carefully built around comfort, privacy, and safety, collapsed into itself like a dying star. I dropped the towel. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stared. I hadn't written that. I never wrote on the mirror. And no one else had been in my home. At least, no one I could see. From that moment, I knew 2 things. 1, I was being watched. 2, the attic wasn't empty. And suddenly, the silence in the house no longer comforted me. It mocked me, it whispered, and all I could do was listen. The first days in the house felt like returning to the silence I had always longed for but never quite found. It was a silence that didn't demand anything from me, a silence that allowed me to exist without explanation. I remember the first morning I woke up in that creaky little house. The light filtered in through half-bent blinds, golden and warm, coating the room in the color of late summer honey. It was the kind of light that made you forget the world outside could be harsh, or loud, or filled with people who wanted more from you than you were willing to give. I made myself coffee in the scratched-up old kitchen. The previous owner had left behind a ceramic mug with a faded rooster on it. Chipped along the handle, I kept it. There was something comforting in its imperfection, like the house itself, used, but not yet broken. I drank from that mug every morning as the floor beneath me moaned and shifted like an old friend waking up beside me. I convinced myself it was the charm of the place, that old homes breathe in their own way. Everything was stillness, not silence but stillness. Even when there was sound, leaves outside, the fridge humming, a squirrel darting across the roof, it felt contained, tame, like the house held it all in place so I wouldn't have to. And maybe that's why I didn't notice it right away. Maybe that's why it took so long for the unease to set in. Because that's how it works, doesn't it? You don't notice the small changes when you're happy. When things feel right, you dismiss the tiny shifts because admitting they're real would mean admitting something else is wrong. And in those early days, I wanted to believe everything was fine. I needed to believe it. I spent hours rearranging furniture, putting up pictures, organizing books on a shelf I'd built myself. I painted the front door red, just because I'd read somewhere that red doors bring good luck. At night, I lit candles and let the scent of vanilla and pinewood mix with the creaking of floorboards. I told myself the creaks were natural, just the house settling, just old bones groaning in the dark. But sometimes I felt something that didn't make sense. A cold patch of air at the top of the stairs, no matter how warm the day had been. A faint draft that didn't come from any window. The sense, so subtle I could barely name it, that someone had just walked out of a room the moment I stepped in. It was nothing, always nothing, but somehow, it never quite stopped being there. I told myself I was tired. Moving is stressful. Changing environments disrupts the senses. It made sense, didn't it, that I feel a little off balance? And so I leaned into the routine. Wake up, coffee, sit by the window and read the news I pretended to care about. Maybe go for a walk, say hello to the couple who walked their dog at exactly 9:15 every morning. Come back, cook something simple, watch something forgettable, lock the doors, double check them, and go to bed. Rinse, repeat. Sometimes I play music while I cooked. Nothing loud, just quiet. Old stuff, Billie Holiday, Nina Simone, the kind of music that clings to shadows and turns the evening into something sacred. I like that. I like the sense that I was building a life here. One night, I even danced, silly, alone, barefoot on hardwood. I spun myself in a slow, offbeat circle until I laughed, breathless, like I hadn't in years. But joy, like silence, is fragile. It cracks at the corners when you press on it too long. And as the days moved on, I noticed those cracks. The spoon I left in the sink would be in the drying rack the next morning. The back door, always locked, was once found ajar, just slightly, barely noticeable unless you looked closely. I told myself it was me, that I'd forgotten, that I'd been careless, and yet, I wasn't a careless person. I'm the type who checks the oven twice before leaving the house. Who always remembers if I brushed my teeth, who notices if the blinds are tilted half an inch more than they were the day before. But still, I clung to my logic, because logic was safe. Logic meant I wasn't losing my mind. Logic meant there was no one else here but me. There was one morning I remember clearly, more clearly than the others. I was standing in the kitchen, staring at the coffee pot, waiting for it to finish brewing. The light was soft, the room was quiet, too quiet, not in a peaceful way, but in a way that made my ears strain for something, anything. I stepped away for a moment to grab my phone. When I came back, the rooster mug was already full. Still steaming, I stood there, blinking, holding my breath. I hadn't poured it, I was certain, and yet, there it was, sitting where I always left it, like nothing had changed. I didn't drink the coffee that day. I left the house instead, spent hours wandering around bookstores, cafes, anywhere that wasn't there. When I finally returned home, the mug was still full, now cold, as if nothing had happened, as if it had all been in my head. That night, I tried not to sleep. I lay in bed with every light on, blanket pulled up to my chin, listening. For what? I didn't know, but I listened anyway, and somewhere, around 2:15 a.m., I heard it again. Soft, deliberate, a single step, above me. My throat tightened, my fingers curled around my phone. I didn't call anyone, I just listened, and then, silence, but not the silence I once loved. This silence was thick, pressing, breathing, alive, and still, I did nothing, because part of me didn't want to know, because some truths feel more terrifying than any lie we tell ourselves, because confronting what might be real what might be waiting just above the ceiling. Felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. So I slept, eventually, restless, shallow, one eye always halfway open. And in the morning, everything seemed normal again. The sun rose, the floor creaked, the world moved on, as if the night had never happened. But I knew, somewhere deep in the gut of me, I knew something had shifted, that the house had exhaled something it had been holding in, that the peace I'd once felt here had turned sour in my mouth. And the worst part, I wasn't sure if I'd ever felt safe at all, or if the fear had always been here, waiting for me to notice it. Something inside me had shifted. It was subtle at first, like a note out of tune in a familiar song, but once I heard it, I couldn't unhear it. I could no longer move through the house without listening for sounds I shouldn't be hearing. I could no longer stand in silence without sensing that it wasn't just me anymore, that I was being noticed. It began with the little things, always the little things. A spoon not where I left it, a book turned upside down, a door that was shut the night before found slightly ajar in the morning. I told myself I must be tired, must be clumsy, must be forgetting. That's what sane people do. They explain, they rationalize, but explanations are just stories we tell ourselves to keep from falling apart. One morning, I found the kitchen window cracked open. Not fully, just enough for a draft to creep in. Enough for a squirrel maybe, or a raccoon, except I didn't remember unlocking that window. In fact, I hadn't touched it since I moved in. Still, I closed it and told myself it didn't matter. Maybe the wind had done it, maybe I forgot. But later that day, I found my front door unlocked. And that wasn't something I ever forgot. I've always been meticulous with locks. 2 dead bolts, checked every night. The habit of someone who grew up afraid of things that go bump in the night. So when I found it unlocked, my first thought wasn't, maybe I forgot. It was, who unlocked it? And from that moment, the paranoia found a place to nest. I started sleeping less, not because I couldn't, but because I wouldn't. I couldn't bear the idea of closing my eyes when I wasn't sure what might be moving above me. So I stayed up, night after night, lights off, phone in hand, ears tuned to the ceiling. It was always around the same time. Between 2 o'clock and 3 a.m. I'd hear it, a dull thump. Sometimes followed by the softest scrape, as if someone were dragging a foot, or shifting their weight carefully, deliberately. Too soft to be bold, too real to be dismissed. The house had an attic, yes, but it wasn't a place I ever used. The entrance was in the hallway ceiling, accessible only by a wooden ladder I never extended. That space was forgotten, ignored until now. Now it felt like the center of the house, like a secret heart, beating just above me, pulsing with presence. One night, I placed a chair in the middle of the living room, just sat, waited, no music, no lights, just the hum of silence. I counted the seconds between noises. I tracked patterns. I recorded on my phone. But every time I played it back, nothing. No thump, no scrape, just my own ragged breathing. Louder than I realized. That's the thing about fear. It's rarely loud. It's not the scream in the hallway or the crash of glass at midnight. It's the creak of a board you thought you fixed. The way your keys aren't where you left them. The moment you start to question your own hands, your own memory. Fear lives in the almost, the maybe, the what if, and the mirror. That damned mirror returned with another message. This time, I didn't find it right away. I stepped out of the shower like always, toweled off, glanced casually at the fogged up glass, but something caught my eye. A pattern, not words this time, just lines, 5 parallel strokes, like tally marks, like someone keeping track of time, or days, or me. That was when I bought the motion sensor camera. I told myself it was for peace of mind, that once I saw nothing, I could move on, sleep again, breathe again. I set it up in the hallway, pointed toward the attic hatch. It had night vision, motion alerts, a digital memory card. I told myself it was smart, logical, safe. That night, I stayed up with the monitor next to me. Midnight passed, then 1 o'clock, then 2 o'clock. My eyes blurred with fatigue. But then, at 2:43 a.m., the screen flickered. A soft click, the camera had registered motion. I didn't want to look, but I did. At first, there was nothing, just stillness, grainy darkness. Then, a flicker, a shape, human, pale, just beneath the attic hatch. For 1 second, maybe less, it reached a hand down, and then pulled it back. I couldn't breathe. I didn't call anyone. I didn't move. I just sat there, frozen, my heart thudding in my chest like it wanted to escape me. I replayed the footage, again and again, same flicker, same hand, same retreat. He knew I was awake. I didn't sleep. I didn't blink. I waited until the sun clawed its way through the blinds and filled the room with enough light to lie to me, to make me believe I was safe. But I wasn't. The attic hatch was still closed, locked. In fact, I hadn't heard it open. I hadn't heard it close. But someone, something, had reached down through it. I should have called the police. I should have grabbed a bat, a knife, anything. But fear paralyzes in ways logic can't undo. It convinces you to wait, to hesitate, to tell yourself maybe it wasn't real. Maybe the camera glitched. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Because it's easier to doubt yourself than to admit there's a stranger living inches above your head. Instead, I climbed the stairs slowly, step by trembling step. I didn't open the hatch. I couldn't, not yet, but I stood beneath it, looking up, listening. Silence. Perfect, deafening, intentional. He was up there, I knew it, but I wasn't ready to meet him yet. Not alone. They say fear makes time move slower, and I believe it now. The minutes leading up to that night felt like molasses dripping down the walls. I didn't want to go up. That wasn't the plan. I had promised myself I would call someone, anyone, before doing anything. But there's a moment in every person's life where fear becomes unbearable, where not knowing is worse than knowing. That moment came at 2:43 a.m. I had fallen asleep on the couch. Lights off, camera still aimed at the attic hatch, soundless except for the low hum of electricity and my own shallow breath. But something pulled me from sleep. Not a noise, not even a dream, just presence, the kind of awareness that slides into your bones before your eyes can open. When I sat up, the hairs on the back of my neck were already standing. The room was dark, but not empty. I didn't hear anything at first, not until I stood, and then I heard the faintest whisper of motion, wood settling. No, a shift, a drag, a breath. My hand went to the flashlight automatically, even though I hadn't touched it in days. The cold metal felt like a weapon in my palm, though I knew it wouldn't help me. I walked toward the hallway slowly, every step silent but screaming. There it was, the attic hatch, still closed, still harmless looking, a square of white in a ceiling full of shadows. But I knew he was there, not because I heard him, but because I felt him, the same way you feel eyes watching you in a crowded room. That sense of audience, that you are no longer alone here. I reached up, pulled the string, the ladder creaked as it descended, dust cascading like old snowflakes around me. The opening above was black, a black that swallowed light. I clicked the flashlight on and climbed the first rung. With every step, the air changed. It got thicker, not just stale, but aware, like the attic had been waiting to be opened, like it was holding its breath too. The wood beneath my feet felt softer than I expected, like it had absorbed too much moisture or something else. My heart was hammering in my ears now, loud enough to drown out my own thoughts. I reached the top and slowly poked my head into the opening. Nothing, just darkness and the beam of my light slicing through it. I moved it left, right, and then I saw it. Not a person, not yet, but evidence, proof, a sleeping bag in the far corner, crumpled, flattened from use. Next it, wrappers, empty plastic bottles, a yellowing towel, and a stack of clothes. And then, a notebook, black cover, torn edges, sitting neatly on a square of cardboard like it had been placed with care. My hand trembled as I climbed all the way in. The floor groaned beneath my weight, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. I needed to see. I needed to know. I stepped slowly toward the corner, the beam of my light flickering over items that did not belong to me. An old shoe, a toothbrush, half a melted candle, a spoon with bite marks. And that's when I heard the breath. It didn't come from behind me. It didn't come from above or below. It came from the left, hidden behind one of the crossbeams. Slow, wet, controlled, like someone trying to be quiet but unable to contain themselves. I froze. My hand tightened around the flashlight. I thought of running, of screaming, but no sound came out. My throat was locked, my feet were lead. I turned the light, and there he was, squatting, pale, thin, his limbs spidered out beneath him like he had folded himself into the walls. His eyes were wide, terrified, or something else. He didn't flinch, didn't move, just stared. His mouth opened slowly, like it hadn't done so in days. His voice was cracked and dry. "I thought you knew." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My body was no longer mine. I backed away, one foot behind the other, until I felt the edge of the opening behind me. And then I dropped. I didn't even use the ladder. I just fell. My ankle twisted, my elbow hit tile. But I didn't care. I ran, through the hallway, into the bathroom, slammed the door shut and locked it with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. He hadn't followed me, not then, but he didn't need to. I sat on the floor for what felt like hours, listening to nothing, and that was somehow worse than if he had tried to break in. Because it meant he was waiting, that he had been waiting this whole time, that this house had never been mine. I thought of the journal. Still up there. I hadn't grabbed it. I didn't want to touch it. I was afraid it might have my name in it. My face, my schedule, my dreams. What if it was filled with drawings? What if it had records of everything I'd ever done in this house? Eventually, I called the police. They arrived fast, guns drawn. They climbed the attic, but it was empty. Gone, only the sleeping bag remained. The wrappers, the notebook, but no man, no breath, no voice, as if he had evaporated. But he was real. I had seen him, smelled him, heard him, and his words still haunted me. "I thought you knew." The police told me it was probably a transient, a squatter, one of them said, almost casually, like they were talking about rats or raccoons. "You'd be surprised how often this happens. People find a warm space, settle in, move on." He said it with the kind of practiced detachment that only comes from hearing your own horror story too many times. But this wasn't a squatter. This wasn't random. He knew my name. He knew my routine. He watched me. And when the officers climbed up there, after I had fallen out like something spit from the dark, he was gone. Vanished, like a whisper sucked into the walls. But the journal was still there. They handed it to me in an evidence bag, sealed like something diseased. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't even want to look at it. But they insisted I take it, in case it's relevant. They said, "If he comes back, comes back." The words echoed like they were written across my skin. Comes back, as if he had ever really left. That night, I couldn't bring myself to be in the house. I stayed at a friend's place, though I didn't tell them why. I just said I needed a change of scenery. I said it with a laugh, brittle and dry, like the words were cutting my throat on the way out. I slept with the lights on, but I didn't sleep. The journal sat in my backpack. I could feel its weight, like it was breathing through the fabric, waiting for me to open it. And I did, eventually. I laid it on the table. My hands shook as I peeled open the cover. The pages were yellowed, worn at the edges, fingerprints darkening the corners. The handwriting was messy but deliberate, like he was trying to control something inside himself. But failing. The first entry was dated 6 weeks earlier. "He's moved in. He likes quiet. He walks barefoot in the kitchen. Doesn't sing. Doesn't talk on the phone much." Good. I stopped reading. I stared at the sentence until the words blurred into shapes. My stomach turned. I wanted to vomit. I closed the book, then opened it again, like I was trying to wake from a dream that refused to end. The entries weren't stories. They were logs, observations, recordings, sometimes hours long. He ate cereal today, 2 bowls, sat in silence, looked out the window for 12 minutes, blinked a lot, might be thinking about someone. Another page, he smiled while cutting an apple. First time I've seen that. Looks better when he smiles. Another, he danced last night, looked lonely, or happy, hard to tell. I didn't sleep, just watched. He had been there the whole time. Through the mornings, through the showers, through the moments I thought were mine alone. And he had written it all down. Every page was a dissection of my life. And then came the drawings. Sketches, some crude, some disturbingly detailed. My bed, my bookshelf, the chipped mug with the rooster. My back as I sat at the kitchen table, head in hand. He'd drawn it from above. The angle was the attic vent. He was watching through the vent. I dropped the journal. I couldn't breathe. This was no squatter. This was devotion. This was worship twisted into obsession. I wasn't just a person in his story. I was the story. On one page, he had drawn my eyes, over and over, like he was trying to get them right, like he had memorized every line. Underneath, he'd written, "He doesn't know I see him, but I always see him." And then, the last page, it was blank, except for one word, "Stay." I slammed the cover shut. I felt violated. exposed, ruined, like my body had been photographed 1,000 times without my permission. My mind started replaying every moment I thought I was alone, every private dance, every bad dream, every tear cried in the dark. He had seen it all, and he had cataloged it. I went to the police, showed them the journal, they scanned it, photocopied it, promised to investigate, but the man was gone. No fingerprints, no DNA, no name, nothing in the system. It was like he had never existed, except in my ceiling, in my home, in my life. The officer set up a patrol for a week, came by every night, knocked on the door, shined flashlights into bushes, smiled like everything was under control, but they didn't feel what I felt, that it wasn't over, that he was still watching, maybe from afar, maybe from next door, maybe from behind me. I moved 2 weeks later, packed everything in a single day, threw out the rooster mug, left the journal with the police, burned the mattress, the house sat empty after that, for sale sign out front, cheap price, a motivated seller, but I knew better. That house didn't belong to me. It never did. It belonged to him, and maybe still does. I moved out like someone escaping a war zone. I didn't pack carefully. I didn't label boxes. I didn't fold clothes. I grabbed what I could, shoved it into bags, and left behind everything that smelled like memory. I told myself I was leaving the house, but I wasn't. I was leaving the part of myself that had started to rot in there. That part that had smiled alone in the kitchen while being watched. That part that had sung in the shower under someone else's gaze. That part that had slept peacefully beneath a stranger's breath. The new apartment was fine. Small, white walls, no attic. That was non-negotiable. I told the agent, no attic, no crawl space, no trapdoors. He looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I was, but he found one, eventually. A studio on the 4th floor of a building downtown. Windows, concrete ceiling, a place light could reach. But light doesn't always mean safety. For the first week, I didn't unpack. I kept everything in boxes, as if part of me knew this wasn't a home, it was just a hiding spot. I slept on the floor, back to the wall, facing the door. I didn't trust the bed. I didn't trust silence. I didn't trust myself. At night, I kept the lights on. Every light, bathroom, closet, oven display, even the fridge light. I rigged it to stay on, just so there wouldn't be a single shadow in the place. Still, the shadows came, not the kind cast by furniture or curtains, but the kind that live behind your eyes. The kind that only show up when you close them. I had dreams, not of him, not exactly. I never saw his face again. I don't think I could even describe it. Just fragments, pale skin, eyes too wide, the breath, always the breath, but in the dreams, the setting was wrong. It wasn't the attic. It was here, my new place, my safe place, and I could feel him watching me from somewhere I hadn't found yet. Like he had carved a new hollow space inside the building and was waiting for me to discover it. One night, I woke up in a sweat, heart slamming in my chest like a fist against a locked door. I had heard it again, the sound, not from above this time, but behind the walls, just a single knock, or scrape, or whisper. I turned on music, I turned on white noise. I opened the window just to hear the street. I couldn't bear the silence anymore. Silence, to me, had become the enemy, because silence could hide anything. A breath, a footstep, a voice that didn't belong to me. So I filled my days with sound, TV, podcasts, city noise. I let commercials play on loop. I hated it, but I hated silence more. People asked me how I was. I lied. I said I was doing fine. I said it was crazy, right? And laughed like it was a story someone had told me once. Not something that had split me in two. I became good at pretending, smiling at cashiers, answering emails, drinking coffee in cafes where no one knew who I was, where no one had watched me. But there were signs it hadn't passed. I stopped using mirrors. I covered them with sheets, towels, anything I had. I didn't want to see myself anymore, because every time I did, I remembered that he had seen me too, that he had stared at my reflection, studied it, maybe memorized it. What does it do to a person? To become a museum someone has wandered through without permission. One day, I found a note under my door. It was blank, just a sheet of lined paper, folded twice. I stared at it for 10 minutes. Didn't open it, didn't move. My body froze like a deer staring down headlights. Eventually, I opened it. Nothing. No words. No signature. Just paper. But it didn't feel empty. It felt charged, as if the absence of words meant more than any sentence could say. I reported it to the building manager. He shrugged. Kids, he said, probably a joke, but I saw the way he looked at me, like I was cracked. Like I had dragged something invisible in with me, and it was starting to leak out into the hallway. I started checking behind vents. I unscrewed fixtures. I opened every cabinet 3 times a day. I counted the light bulbs before leaving and after returning. I slept in shifts, an hour here, 2 hours there. I put a baby monitor in the hallway even though I had no baby. I stopped answering my phone, blocked numbers, changed my email, deleted social media. I didn't want to be seen anymore. Not by anyone. Because now, being seen wasn't about connection. It wasn't about intimacy or comfort. It was about vulnerability, about being exposed, about being turned into something consumable. The worst part, I still didn't know why. Why me? Why my house? Why my life? Had he chosen me randomly? Had he watched others before? Was he watching someone else now? These questions became obsessions. I started searching local forums. Threads about stalkers, missing persons, home invasions. A pattern emerged. Cases like mine, similar, not identical. People who felt watched, people who heard things. Some found squatters, some found nothing. Some were never heard from again. One post caught my attention. Sometimes they don't watch because they're curious. Sometimes they watch because they think you're theirs. That line didn't let go of me. It clung to my ribs. It whispered behind every creak in my new home. It explained nothing and everything. What if he hadn't picked me? What if he believed I was meant for him? What if every journal entry, every drawing, every breath had been part of his claiming? That night, I woke up at exactly 2:43 a.m. Same time, same stillness, same dread. I lay there, staring at the ceiling that couldn't possibly hold him, and yet somehow still did. It's been 3 months since I left that house. I'd like to say I'm better. I'd like to tell you the bad dreams have stopped, that the shadows don't bother me anymore, that I sleep through the night and drink coffee without checking over my shoulder. I'd like to say that, but it wouldn't be true. There's something no one tells you about fear. Real fear, the kind that doesn't scream in your face but sits with you. The kind that doesn't come from what happened, but from what could have. That kind of fear doesn't disappear. It becomes structural, like mold growing into the foundation of a house. Invisible until everything starts to rot. I live in a new place now. New locks, new floors, new number on the mailbox. The air smells clean, and the ceilings are concrete. I made sure of that. There's no way in, not from above, but every now and then, I still find myself looking up. Sometimes it's not even conscious, just a twitch in the eyes, a glance, a hesitation before turning off the light. Sometimes I hear a creak, one I know came from the apartment next door, but I still hold my breath. Just in case. Sometimes, when I'm falling asleep, I wonder if someone's behind the drywall. Not watching, just there, breathing with me, waiting. I try to remind myself that he's gone, that the police searched everything, that the journal is still in evidence, that I moved miles away, that I changed every detail of my life I could afford to change. But trauma is a trickster. It doesn't live in logic. It lives in routine. I wake up at 2:43 a.m. almost every night. I've stopped trying to explain it. It's not the sound that wakes me. It's the feeling, that static pressure, that shift in the air, that ripple in the silence where something else should not be. And when I do wake, I don't panic. I just listen. For the first few weeks, I get up, check the windows, the closets, the vents. Now, I don't bother. There's nothing to find, but it doesn't matter. The act of fear is enough. Even if it's misplaced, even if he's truly gone. Because what he did, what he was, doesn't need his body to exist. He made a home in my mind, and he built it well. I went to therapy, briefly. The woman was kind, soft-spoken. She had a bookshelf full of words like resilience, and boundaries, and healing. She told me I wasn't alone, that survivors often carry this with them. She said trauma reshapes the brain, that the fear isn't irrational, it's protective. I stopped going after 3 sessions, not because she was wrong, but because I didn't want to talk about him anymore. Because part of me didn't believe he was gone. Because saying his name aloud felt like conjuring. Because what if he was listening? I've made new habits. I sleep with a white noise machine. I use blackout curtains. I keep a flashlight by the bed. My doors have 3 locks now, and I know the sound each one makes when it clicks into place. I've learned the creaks of the building like a second language. Which pipe groans, which stair flexes, which board hums. I know my surroundings better than I know myself. But that hasn't made the fear go away. It's just made it easier to predict. The irony is, I miss the version of myself who used to trust silence, who believed in the comfort of stillness, who thought solitude was sacred. That version of me is gone, replaced by someone who sees shadows and curtains, who listens too long to silence, who never, ever walks past a vent without looking in. He didn't just break into my home, he broke into my time, my routines, my memories, my most private, unfiltered self. And that's something you don't get back, ever. People say things like, at least you weren't hurt, or it could have been worse, and I smile. Because yes, my body is intact. I wasn't assaulted, I wasn't killed, I wasn't dragged into a basement and turned into a headline. But part of me is gone, and there's no police report for that. No hotline, no justice system for the theft of safety. The truth, I don't think he meant to hurt me. That's the part that haunts me the most. I think he thought he loved me. I think he thought I was his. Like a pet, like a painting, like something beautiful and silent and his to admire from the dark. His words echo sometimes, not in dreams, but in memory. I thought you knew. What a terrifying sentence. Because in a way, I did. Not in words, but in the way the floor creaked, in the way the food vanished, in the way the mirror fogged, in the way my body tensed at night. Some part of me, deep and primal, knew. And still, I stayed. I think about that a lot. Why didn't I leave sooner? Why didn't I climb into the attic earlier? Why didn't I listen to that instinct? And then I remember, because it's easier to believe we're alone than to admit we're not. Because loneliness, as cruel as it is less frightening than being observed. Because to face the truth would have meant facing a version of reality where I had no control. And I don't think anyone wants to live in that world. So yes, I stayed, until I couldn't anymore. And now I move through the world differently. I cross the street when I feel watched. I change my routines. I keep my back to the wall in coffee shops. I make eye contact less. I talk to fewer people. I live smaller, and that's the final gift he gave me. A smaller life, a quieter one, not by choice, but by survival.